transferable skills. So a first-time job seeker, or it might not be your first time, but the first time in a new industry. Usually you can also use your transferable skills. Everyone thinks of when you're going into a different career. So how many of you are thinking of a career transition, either here at UC Davis or outside of UC Davis? And those of you on the chat, go ahead and raise your hand if you're thinking of a new career. Anyone here thinking of doing a career transition? Okay, we've got quite a few. All right, yeah. We've got a few like, I don't know, and that's okay. That's okay. Maybe this will help you, make some decisions around that. So if you're thinking of doing a completely different shift, so you're going from one completely different department to another, or you're leaving your career and going back to school or something, you clearly need to really highlight your transferable skills. But you also can highlight your transferable skills even if you do a position with the same employer. So again, it could be a different department at UC Davis and they're looking for very different skills. It could even just be a promotion within your current job, but to get the next level at your current job, you might need to highlight very different skills than the ones you're using, because the ones you're using right now come under a different job description. Am I missing anyone? Like, is anyone here because they want to really learn about transferable skills outside of first-time job seeking, major career transition, promotion, lateral move, or maybe some other types of non-work activities like philanthropic or volunteer or board position? Anyone here for any other reason besides those? I'd be curious because I'm like, all right, this box is getting bigger. No? Okay. If anyone in the chat is actually really interested in using transferable skills for something outside of what I just mentioned, I'd actually love to hear that because it can expand our box even bigger. It makes you realize that your transferable skills, like the things that you can highlight throughout your career, and we'll talk about career being very global, can be very useful throughout your lifetime. So when we think about transferable skills, what am I really talking about? So just go ahead and call some things out. Like when I say that term, transferable skills, what do you think I mean? What are skills, first of all? Are skills different than talents? Are they different than abilities? Yeah. Okay. So skills are acquired, and how are they acquired? So through learning, through trying things out, through doing repetitive work. Yep. How else are your skills acquired? Can your skills be acquired through formal education? Yes. Yeah, they can. Some people would argue, well, that's education and it's different than skills, but they can overlap. Can you have a natural born talent that is also a skill? Yes, you absolutely can. Many of you have some natural born talents that are probably skills. I'm trying to think of some right now. Maybe problem solving skills, analytical abilities. Maybe you're just born with great communication skills. Maybe you are born with a great speaking voice. There are lots of things that are natural born talents, that are innate talents, that would also be considered skills. So think of talents are with you from birth. Skills, usually, as you mentioned, are acquired through work and education. So they can be knowledge skills, which would be the ones that we learn about in school, but they also can be functional skills, and that's what you mentioned when you said repetitive activities that we sort of do on an everyday basis, and we actually take them for granted because we do them all the time and we don't even think of them as skills. If I asked all of you if you have really great, wonderful, technology skills, and if you work with computers, you'd probably shrug and be like, oh, I'm okay. But you do probably have some amazing technology and computer skills just because you're working in 2018 with a computer every day probably. But it's something you take for granted. So think about not only the skills that you acquire through knowledge and the skills that you acquire through function, but also the things that you might do all the time and you don't even really think about. Abilities are often referred to as personal traits and areas of self-discipline. So it's a little different. They can develop into full-fledged knowledge or function skills, even if they originally stem from your natural born talents. But when you think of someone's ability, how do you differentiate that from a talent? So look at someone that's an Olympic athlete like Michael Phelps. Is his swimming an ability or a talent or a skill, or all three? What do you think? All three. How? Yep, he has a natural aptitude. He works at it. He probably also has studied it as a methodology, the best practices of each stroke. And so, yeah, I would agree with that. And probably many of you also have some natural born talents, some abilities and some skills, and they probably all overlap. Have you ever seen the phrase KSA, knowledge, skills, and abilities, in like a government application, for example? Have you ever seen that? So if you apply to the military or a lot of government positions, they actually will say right in the job description, KSA, they're looking for your knowledge, skills, and abilities. I don't think I've necessarily seen that here at UC Davis, the KSA, but there are some people, you might work with someone that has former military or government training, and they might refer to that sometimes with you. And even if they don't refer to it, if they're the ones that's looking at your application for a job, for example, they're thinking in their head, what are her KSAs? And so it's just kind of something to think about, you know. Come on in. There's a great book by an author called Julia Cameron, C-A-M-E-R-O-N. It's actually called The Artist's Way. And it may sound like it has nothing to do with what we're talking about because you're thinking, well, I'm not an artist, or maybe you are. But she really talks about how we all have an art that runs through us. It's sort of like our through line or our sweet spot. It's really and what some people call an archetype. And we all have that. And so you might have at your core, your sweet spot or your archetype might be communicator. Yours might be teacher. Yours might be mentor. You know, everyone kind of has this really core thing. And I think part of transferable skills is figuring out what is your through line, what has carried you through all of your jobs, all of your education at the core. What is your archetype? And it's not that you can't go beyond that. It's actually an empowering thing. It's not supposed to make you feel limited. It's supposed to make you feel like this is really empowering. So if I'm going on a job interview and the job interview needs really strong communication background and skills, but my current job, I don't do that, but I am a communicator, and that's what I've been doing my whole life in all of my positions without even realizing it, then there are your talking points around your transferable skills. Those of you that have read the book know that she is referring to artists, as in people that are, you know, drawing and performing, but she's also referring to the fact that all of us have sort of this art that runs through us and that we bring with us everywhere we go. So think of it as almost like an archetype. Does anyone have any familiarity with their archetype? Like, does anyone really kind of know what their through line is that they do in all their jobs, even if it's not their title? Someone asked, is that similar to personality tests? It can be. Personality tests, depending on what they are, like the Myers-Briggs or the Gallup Strength Finders, tend to pull out more your strengths or your abilities, or like Myers-Briggs studies things like the difference between introversion and extroversion. And so it's a little different because this is really more about you and your personality. And even if I studied you as a child, like even in school, on the recess field, with your parents, with your teachers, and all the positions that you took up in school and volunteer work, and all of your jobs, we could probably pull something out, and that would become like your through line or your core, even if it has nothing to do with your title. So I'll give you an example from myself. My archetype is teacher, and yet I'm not a teacher, but I am a teacher. And what I mean by that is, my first job was a teacher. I was a teacher at the New York School for the Deaf while I was putting myself through law school. But after that, I was a lawyer. And you think lawyers aren't teachers. They should be. A good lawyer should be constantly teaching and counseling. And then I became a productivity consultant and speaker and coach. And again, what I'm really doing is teaching. And so that comes through in all of my careers. Is it my title anymore? Absolutely not. But it is an archetype. So I think it's important to think about, do you have a through line or an archetype? And what is it? And people will often spend a lot of time thinking about this. I would say give it a little thought, but if you really can't come up with one, it's okay. If anyone on the chat knows what their through line or their art or their archetype is, feel free to chime in and let us know, because I think it's useful for other people to hear. So where do we highlight these transferable skills? Well, first and foremost, we highlight them on our resume or our CV because we want to bring them forward. So if you're applying for a job and you're going to be talking about these transferable skills, they better show up on that document, because you and I know that that's the main document that people are going to be looking at. Where do they fall on a CV or resume? They can fall within the job description of the jobs you're already doing. But if you're not doing many of these skills, but you know you have them, then we'll have to talk about where else can they show up. They can show up in volunteer activities that should be on your resume or your CV. They can also show up in your objective statement or summary statement at the top, where you summarize either who you are in the past, which is a summary statement, 20 plus career professional in, communications with, great problem solving skills and analytical abilities, summary. Or objective is what you want, 20-year plus career professional looking for a position in So that's really the only difference. People always ask that beginning part, do I use a summary or an objective? A summary basically looks back and summarizes who you are. An objective basically kind of summarizes it, but it's more looking forward and saying what you want, like where you're going next in your career and what position you're looking for. That's a great place, for a transferable skill. I would say instead of, good question. She said, does it have to be either or? So do you need a summary or objective? I personally think it depends. So if you know exactly what you're looking for, I think an objective is really strong because it says what you're looking for. And in what you're looking for, it summarizes your career. If you're unsure of what you're looking for, or you're doing a broad search, kind of like a floodlight, and you're not really tunnel vision yet, then I would do a summary because it more summarizes your entire career and your entire personality as it matches your skills. But you may not want to hyper niche just yet in terms of your objective. So I think that the answer is it depends on how focused you are on your career search. I see people doing this on social media really well. So for example, LinkedIn, at the beginning of LinkedIn, it gives you a little section to do a bio. That's a great place to put a summary or objective, and a great place to list your transferable skills, especially if they're outside of your current job and you're trying to move to something else. And that something else could just be, I want to go three tiers up from the job I have now in my own department. But the way to do that is I have to start to highlight some of the transferable skills that will get me there that no one's quite seeing in the job that I'm in now. So another great place to do this would be social media. LinkedIn, for example, would be another great place. If you're still doing a cover letter, which I know a lot of places are doing away with a cover letter, I'm a big fan of a cover letter. I feel that a cover letter helps you have the chance to really summarize and say who you are, why you're interested in this position, and how you would be a great candidate. And you can't always do that in a CV or resume. These days, sometimes you apply for a position online. It is an online application system. It says, upload your CV here, and that's it. So how do you deal with that? Well, there are two ways you could deal with it cleverly. You can make your cover letter the first page of your CV. You can make the cover letter the first page of the resume and make it a PDF so that it's all attached. Put a page break. So do cover letter, page break, resume. But it's all one attachment. So since they've asked you to attach your resume, you would get your cover letter in there with it, and they can't really separate it out unless they printed it. That would be one way to do it. Another way is that if you're sending your resume to someone by email and it says, please send, your resume to Lisa Montanaro, and it gives, let's say, my email address. Then since you can send whatever you want, I would then send a cover letter, even if they didn't ask for it, and a resume. I would then make it your cover letter awesome. And that is a great place to list your transferable skills. In fact, unless you get an interview, that might be the only place that you have an opportunity to list your transferable skills would be in that cover letter. The last place to list your transferable skills is what I just mentioned. It is a job interview. So if you are lucky enough to apply for a position and you get an interview, that is your chance to shine in terms of explaining your transferable skills and taking them from this step all the way to here. They're like, so, Lisa, we see that you don't have direct experience in this exact task or skill. How do you think you could excel at the job? And then that's when you draw the little, connect the dots for them and show them, well, based on this experience, this skill, this ability, whatever else it is, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I'll get you to here. It is your job to connect the dots for them. The people interviewing you, it's not that they can't connect the dots, it's that they're inundated with applications and they're looking at people with direct experience. And in order for them to look at someone who has indirect transferable skills, they have to work a little harder. So we want to make their job a little easier by connecting the dots for them. Has anyone had experience doing this in a job interview? Just curious. You don't have to talk about it, but just by a show of hands, have you ever had to convince someone of your transferable skills because you didn't have direct experience for the job you're applying for? Raise your hand if you didn't. Okay, anyone in the chat? Okay, we see some hands raised. Yeah, did you personally? Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah. Okay, good, good. And if they want to put something in the chat about that experience, it actually can be kind of fun. I know that sounds crazy because it sounds nerve-wracking, but it's kind of fun to be able to prove to someone, you may not think that I, have the direct experience. You might not think I fit in your box, but let me explain to you how I not only fit in your box, but I may even be better candidate because of my transferable skills. So it takes a little coaxing, but you can do it. When I taught this workshop last time, a few people here at UC Davis asked a really interesting question. They said, Lisa, I'm having a problem passing go and getting my application looked at because I don't have the degree that they're looking for. That's often harder. If it says, direct qualifications, BA, and then it says preferred qualifications, master's, then you would still have an opportunity even if you don't have the master's, because the master's would be preferred. Obviously, if the master's is required, you're going to have a really hard time. There are some people here at UC Davis that have confided in me that whenever it says preferred, that they pretty much never get an interview because so many candidates apply who have the preferred degree. That is very difficult to do a workaround. In that case, you'd really have to prove that regardless of the fact that you don't have the degree, that you are the absolute best candidate to do that particular job. You have to be able to get the interview to do that. And if you have a search committee, that is, I'm just being honest, that is just doing this litmus test. Like, does it have a master's? Yes, this pile. Does it have a master's? No, that pile. Even if you have the best cover letter and the best transferable skills, if you can't get past that sort of assembly line, and that's really not fair to the search committee, but if you can't get past that sort of wall, it's going to be very difficult. If you can get a search committee that is willing to look at the cover letters more carefully, if you have some amazingly transferable skills, if you've got great networking, great, recommendations, whatever, and you can actually have someone look at your sort of laying out your argument of why you are still a great candidate for this, despite the fact that you don't have that preferred degree, then you probably will have a much greater chance. I can't control the search committees. I wish I could, right? But we can do as much as we can from here out today to figure out a way to highlight your background as much as possible. Has anyone here ever faced that hurdle? Face that hurdle of not having the preferred degree but still wanting to apply for the job? Raise your hand if there's a job that you've looked at that was attractive to you, but you didn't have the preferred degree. Okay, did anyone not apply because you didn't have the required degree? Anyone on the chat raising their hand? Okay, good. So last year that was a really big issue with many of our attendees, that they were like, I'm really struggling because I don't have a preferred degree and I'm not in a place to get it right now. And so we were talking about how to overcome that. But thankfully, it doesn't sound like that's as big of a job this year. So let's jump into the transferable skills list. So how do you know what are your transferable skills? How do you pull them out? One of the first things I'd love for you to do is to, after you leave here today, to use the checklist that I've given you. So you'll see on the handout, it says Job Interview Skills Checklist, and it lists all of the categories that search committees will be using during a job interview process. So they're looking for skills such as employment experience, educational background, leadership, emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills, sensitivity to diversity and cultural differences, communication skills, analytical abilities, creativity, drive and focus, personality, professional image, maturity and poise, organizational and productivity skills, technical skills, and then the interest in the position and the organization. And you'll see under every one of those are a few different subcategories. And the reason I gave you so much with these skills and sub-skills is I want you to start going through this list and checking off little check marks or highlights for every skill and sub-skill that you have that you've never really thought about before because you've never sat down and done an entire, excavation of all of the skills that you have. And it will be very useful for you to start to then compare this list of skills and sub-skills to what's on your resume, to what's in your social media profiles. Professional ones, I'll probably refer just to LinkedIn. Definitely to compare these to your cover letter, and then to start to compare these to job descriptions of the jobs that you want in the next 1 to 5 years. And that is a big tip. If you think you want to go for a specific type of job and you see that, you see that heading out in the next 5 years, I would start to look at those job ads and job descriptions as much as you can to start to see what they look for. And you're not going to manufacture it, but you're going to take a look at those job descriptions and those job advertisements, and then look at your skill list and say, what do I have and what am I missing? And then your job is, based on what you're missing, how can I get it? Can I get it in my current job? Can I take on a chairperson? Can I get on a committee? Can I do volunteer work? Can I take on a certain project in my current position that I've never taken on before that will develop these other skills that I need? So the skill list is both what do I have now and then what am I lacking? And so that you can start to plug the holes. Has anyone kind of made just a fun habit of looking at job ads and job descriptions for their next job to see what they need? It's a good thing to do. Yeah. Obviously, UC Davis, all of the jobs are public. Go ahead. Okay, good. Oh, that's awesome. So we've got some gunners. Yeah. So it's a great thing to do. Places you can do that. And I would be curious for the people that have said, yes, I've kind of made that a little bit of a habit. Where have they done that? So places you can do that are job postings, not just UC Davis. You could look at job postings for other universities, for government agencies, for private sector, just to kind of see, what are people doing in these jobs? And if it's the job I say I want in the next, 1 to 5 years, what do I need to do to get that job? You can look at the organization's website. So if they don't have a current job posting, go to their website and start to pull up the bios of the people in those jobs. So that's another great place to look like, okay, the person that got the job that I kind of think I might want to apply for in the next few years, what's their bio? Like, what's their background? What are their KSAs, their knowledge, skills, and abilities? Have you heard of Glassdoor? Glassdoor is another great website where you can go. Be careful, because a lot of people go on there and just complain. So it can become, kind of a very negative space, but it can also be very, very useful. And you can go on Glassdoor and you can look at people in the positions that you're interested in obtaining, and then look and see, who are they? What have they done? How did they get their skills? What do they talk about in terms of, like, why they might have left a job? People will put on Glassdoor almost like a little exit interview. They'll say, really love working at this place, but I wasn't able to have enough growth, or they switched CEOs, or so it's kind of a great place to sort of mine the fields and see what's going on. Obviously, LinkedIn and other social media is another great place to look for people that are working in the types of jobs that you want. So you go to LinkedIn, you look at someone that has your position, maybe at a different university. That would be the job you want in the next 2 years, and this person's doing it currently. Maybe they're at McGeorge, maybe they're at UC Santa Cruz, and you go onto their LinkedIn and take a look and see what's their background, what associations and professional organizations are they involved in, what volunteer activities, any committees, things like that. So it's almost like grabbing their resume, which is kind of nice. Informational interviews, I know that you all know how important they are. They become really important when you're looking at transferable skills. So if you're doing an informational interview with someone, pardon me, and they're in your exact position, and let's say you have everything already, that's kind of easy. It's like you're chatting with them and they're like, oh, Jennifer, you're perfect for this. I mean, you have the degree, you have all the skills, it's the natural next step. That's kind of the easy informational interview. The harder ones, and the ones that you really want to get, are the ones where you say to someone, I really am interested in moving into this other position, and it's a little bit of a stretch for me. I'd love to take you to coffee and talk a little bit about how I might be able to package my transferable skills, what you think, et cetera. And obviously, if you're going to be asking someone for help in an informational interview, you pay for the coffee and you go to them. And if they don't have time, ask them if you can get 15 minutes on the phone. When people call me and they're like, hey, can you come to Sacramento and have coffee with me so I can pick your brain? I'm like, first of all, you'd be coming to Davis because I live here. And second of all, I might not have time to meet you for coffee. But if someone says, can you spare 15 minutes and I have 3 distinct questions to ask you, I almost always make the time. So, compartmentalize it, put a time frame around it, 15 minutes. And instead of just, you get on the phone, you're like, so tell me about your job. They're like, what do you want to know about my job? So be very distinct in terms of what you want to know, or what they could tell you and maybe have just 3 specific questions. I guarantee you it'll go past 15 minutes, but because you've been respectful of their time and come in with an agenda, they'll probably be more apt to say yes. If you could think of other ways to start to look ahead at the types of jobs you want in the future and figure out what the transferable skills are for those, then please let me know. And those of you on the chat also. The ones that I've come up with are, as I mentioned, looking at job postings. So going to the actual job postings, looking at the organization's website to look at the bios of the position that you're interested in, going to Glassdoor and other job sites, going to LinkedIn or other social media, networking, just chatting with people, you know, and then informational interviews. Let's just go back to networking. That is a really great one also. So if you're interested in doing the next job and there is a professional association involved with that job, thank you. Oh, I thought she was closing the door. If you are interested, thank you, awesome, she's got it. Yeah, so let's talk about, let's say you are, does anyone feel comfortable saying what their area of expertise is or the department they work in? What I'm looking for is a professional association. So what's the professional association for your division, for example? Does anyone have one? Okay, so she's in the design department and you would do AI, you said? AIGA. Okay, good. So for example, let's say you go to an AIGA meeting and you see someone there who you know has sort of the position that you're aiming for. That would be a great place to do some networking and get to know that person in that position. Yeah. HIMSS, so that I assume is the acronym for a professional association. Good, so same thing. At that professional association, if you go to those meetings in person, or if they have like an online listserv, or maybe their own private social media Facebook group or something like that, get to know the people in the positions that you're interested in and network like crazy with those people, because the more that you can find out how they got that position and what their background is, the more you can try to match your transferable skills. And they might be really honest with you and say, you can't miss this particular skill. There's no way you can get a job without it, but you can get an interview without this other skill. Yeah. Good. Good. Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah. Healthcare. Say it again. Healthcare Information Management System Society is the, okay. And then what was the other one? Okay, perfect. Society for Research Administrators, right. So again, you get to know some people on there and they're doing some of these jobs that you want to transfer into, and you're sort of picking their brain and asking them, and you might want to be honest with someone and say, you know, I'm missing this particular transferable skill. How important do you think it is for your position? And they might say, I never used that skill. Or they might say, you really need that skill and you need to go out and get it in the next 2 years in order to even be taken seriously. So that's a great place for you to do some networking. And so I would definitely try your hardest to get to know those people that are sort of at the next level. After you've, let's say, created your transferable skill list, where do you highlight that transferable skill list? You highlight it, as I mentioned, in your cover letter. And don't avoid the elephant in the room. If you're missing a big chunk of something that they're looking for in that job posting, you need to tell them where else you got it from. So let's talk about that. So if your current job, if you're not doing major decision making in your current job, your supervisor does all the major decision making, and but your next job requires major decision making, then we talk about where else do you get your decision making. So let's say you chair a committee on campus, and as the chair, you're constantly making decisions on behalf of your committee. Let's say on top of that, you are on the board of directors of a local association or your professional association like HIMSS or the Society for Research Administrators. So you might be able to get that skill, let's say decision making, elsewhere. And a lot of people will poo-poo their outside activities, but those outside activities actually might give you some really great skills. You might have helped put on a conference at the university last year, and you're on a conference planning committee that has nothing to do with your actual job description. But again, you developed great transferable skills. So let's now start to think about, like, just call some things out. What are the other things you're doing besides just your everyday job? All of you probably have been in committees, major projects, maybe outside activities. So let's first talk about within UC Davis. Does anyone do anything outside their regular job? Good. See? Oh, that's a great example. Yeah. And I'll have to say that I would agree with that, whether I've asked people for 15 minutes or been on the receiving end and someone's asked me for 15, I almost always, again, if the person approaches it a certain way, I almost always give them longer. So that's actually really nice to hear. And they said it was specifically a senior leader here at UC Davis. Good. Awesome. Yeah. And then was there another example? Yeah. Good. So let me repeat that. I just realized they're not hearing that. Oh, in fact, should I repeat the other one? Sorry. So the first person said that they were at a networking event and asked a senior leader for 15 minutes and got an hour and a half. So sorry, that's what I was referring to a few minutes ago, which was a great example of if you ask in a way that's respectful and you have an agenda and you compartmentalize, like, oh, can I have this small chunk of your time, that usually people give you more. This other person mentioned that they have raised puppies for, was it Guiding Eyes? Canine Companions for Independence. And that's another great example of, developing skills. So I would bounce it back to that person and ask that person, go to the transferable skills list and let us know what skills you think volunteering for that organization at such a high level have given you, and how would you highlight those within your cover letter, maybe social media profiles, and job interview. So I could think of many ways that, working for that organization, I shouldn't say working, volunteering for that organization probably gave you some great skills, but I'm curious to see how you would describe them because I think there are probably many. And that's another thing to think about is, we do these things as volunteers either because they feed our soul or because we have a certain philanthropic agenda that we want to meet and we want to help, but we kind of dismiss the fact that they're also giving us these great skills. Someone asked me a question. They said, I feel kind of icky, talking about the skills I've developed when I was doing something that was helpful. I wouldn't feel icky about it. You're not only helping to get these skills. You're helping because you want to help. But why not be able to take these skills you've developed and highlight them? And I would think the organization is grateful for your help and it's not like you're, being greedy and doing something inappropriate. You're already really helpful in your community. You might as well benefit from the fact that you've developed these skills. Was there a follow-up? Good. So somebody said on the chat that they recommend joining a nonprofit board of directors, and that is a great way. And I would recommend either, people always ask me, Lisa, I get asked to be on boards all the time. How do I choose? I think it's a good question. I usually say that it should be one of two things. It should either further your career or further your soul. Those are the two things that I always tell my clients. Either, if you're going to spend all this time on volunteer activities, it either has to feed your soul or further your career, one or the other. Otherwise, it's like if you're just doing it out of obligation, that it's going to take up a lot of your time and you're going to become resentful. So then I wouldn't do that. Does anyone volunteer here for a nonprofit organization now? Would you feel comfortable saying the name? So we've got like two on the chat that have mentioned. Anyone do anything that's related to their career? So you mentioned like a design organization, for example. Oh, nice. So the woman that mentioned that she works in design is actually working with the city of Davis on a public public art map. And then they are also having students come and intern for the program, which is great. So that's giving you leadership skills, collaboration skills in terms of working with others, teamwork skills. I mean, there's so many skills that you're developing there that, you know, if you have all of those skills already in your day job, you don't need to highlight it as much. But let's say you were lacking some of those in your day job and you're like, I really want to highlight these, that would be a great place to do it. Yeah. So again, don't go out and look for a position just to fill skills. Well, actually, why not? Why not? What would be wrong if an organization desperately needs help and you have the skills they need, or you want to develop those skills and you're the one that's willing to step up? Why not? I mean, it could be a match made in heaven. So again, I wouldn't feel any type of, you know, like there's something wrong with you that, oh, I'm just taking this position to develop my skills. No, you're not. Because if you were really just doing it for that, you'd probably say no. You must probably also like the organization or their mission, or you just want to help, you know. Places to go, nonprofits are great. You can either stay local or you can do a national association for, let's say, your area of expertise, or a national association for something that you're interested in, and then your help would be virtual. So you're not like showing up at a meeting, but you're helping like through email or, you know, Zoom or something like that. So you don't always have to stay local. If you're really interested in doing something that's more global, then think globally. Yeah. In terms of the skill list, this skill list that I put here is actually used by a lot of types of search committees. So that's another thing to think about is, you know, don't really take a look at this list and say like, what do I have here? But really take a look at this list and ask yourself, how would I highlight these? How would I talk about these in a cover letter, in a resume, in a job interview? Because these are really similar to what a lot of the search committees are using. And they really are looking for things like, you know, interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence. Yes, they want you to be able to do the job, but they also want you to be able to, you know, work well with others. So really think creatively when you're looking at this list in terms of how you are developing these. There's something that I think I mentioned at the end of your handout that I want to kind of doodle on your flip chart for a few minutes. Yes, I do. On the last page of your handout, it says personal and professional branding. So there's something there that's referred to as your UBP, or your unique brilliance proposition. And the way that it's different than the transferable skills list is that it's usually less about skills and more about you as a person. So the UBP is pretty much everything that makes you uniquely you. So it's like every person has a unique thumbprint, and everyone thinks like, oh, I'm in competition with her for the job, and we're pretty much the same. That is not true. You pretty much can't be equal to anyone when it comes to a job search. There's something that's going to be different about you. So what makes up your UBP? Well, obviously your employment makes up who you are. So like every job you've ever had in your lifetime, including, don't laugh, including jobs you had when you were a kid, when you were in college. You know, a lot of people think like, I can't talk about a job I had, you know, 20 years ago. You could if you develop some specific skills that have stayed with you for a lifetime, for example. Another thing that obviously makes up your UBP is your education. Unless you went to the exact same college and majored in the exact same undergraduate and belonged to the exact same clubs, then you're not going to be equal to the next candidate, because you're probably never going to be exactly the same. Another thing is your expertise. So, you know, what are you an expert in? Your languages that you speak. How many people in this room speak a language other than English? Raise your hand. Which language do you speak other than English? French. Okay. Which language? Vietnamese. Okay. Anyone else? I speak American Sign Language and some Italian. Anyone on the chat? Raise your hand if you speak another language. That is a huge part of your UBP. That is a huge part of your transferable skills. Make sure that that is on your resume, your CV, your LinkedIn, etc. Anyone? Good, good. Another part of what makes up your UBP is your personality. So, how personable are you? Are you warm and friendly? Are you a drill sergeant? You know, it could be a good way. Are you a get-it-done type person who takes charge, who's a good natural-born leader? Do you have an amazing amount of empathy for others? You know, what makes up your personality? That's a huge part of your UBP. Do you have experience working in certain settings or with certain populations? Again, that can be very unique. And if you need an example, I'll give you an example. I have experience working with the deaf population, so people that are deaf or hard of hearing. I speak sign language. That's very unique. If a position, you know, obviously had access. Now, would I only be able to apply for jobs where I'm working with the deaf? No, because what does that show? What does that show that I have experience working with that particular population? So maybe there's another job where it's a different type of population, but maybe that population is also either a population with a disability or a population that's considered a minority. That just shows a certain type of person that would be attracted to working in that setting or with that particular population. And so that's another thing to not overlook about yourself. And again, some of these things you could have done a long time ago, but they say a lot about you. What are your hobbies, your interests, and your passions? And again, that tells me a lot about a person. When I'm meeting a person and I'm either interviewing them or networking with them, like the person that was doing something with the companion animals, that's gonna really resonate with me as someone that has 2 rescue dogs and is married to a veterinarian. So that is definitely an area where on an interview, the 2 of us would bond. If you're telling me that you speak French, I've honeymooned in France. It's a big part of my marriage. I've been back there twice with my husband. I'm going to want to talk to you about France if I see that on your resume. So the things that you think you should leave off, like, oh, they're not going to want to know that, are actually often the things that you want to leave on. And then volunteerism, you've heard me mention more than once. Can anyone think of anything in their unique brilliance proposition, like that makes them uniquely them, that I didn't list here? Employment, education, expertise, languages, personality, experience in certain settings. By the way, under languages, I'm also going to list, and this is going to sound strange, but I'll explain, accents. So a lot of people are trying to get rid of their accents. If your accent is getting in the way of your communication skills because you can't be clearly understood, then you might want to do accent modification coaching. But if your accent is not getting in the way of your communication skills, and in fact is what a lot of people would be attracted to, like, oh, you have a beautiful accent, where are you from, or what languages do you speak, then again, that could be a wonderful conversation starter. So that is another interesting area that I think people are nervous about, but it could actually be an additional thing to think about. In addition to your UBP, somebody brought up earlier the personality profile assessments, and there are many. There's Myers-Briggs, there is the Gallup Strength Finders, there is DISC, D-I-S-C. So if you've never heard of these, Myers-Briggs, also known as, I think, MBTI, DISC, Gallup Strength Finders, Enneagram, Enneagram. Enneagram you can take for free online. It has a long test and a short test. I actually kind of like that one. It's kind of neat. Some of these other ones you have to pay for, but sometimes you can find them for free. And then another one is really neat, and it's called Fascination Advantage. It's a new one in the last 6 years, and it was developed by a woman named Sally Hogshead. I know, bizarre, funny name, but it's her real name. And Fascination Advantage is another one of those personality profile assessments. I'm going to give you one last thing before we part that I would really love for you to think about. It is called the 5 words branding exercise. And all of these are just designed so that you can really know yourself well and know your skills outside of the ones that are in the box that you do for your present job. Remember, we're trying to think outside that box. So thinking about your UBP is thinking outside the box, because not everyone, you're not going to list all of these things in your current job, right? If I asked you right now to write your current job description, you're not going to list all these things, but these are things you need to know about yourself if you're thinking of going for a different position or changing careers or something like that. These personality profile assessments are, again, just ways for you to know yourself a little more. Another one is called the 5 words branding exercise. And the idea is try to come up with who you are in 5 words. And it's very difficult. If any of you have read the book Eat, Pray, Love, Elizabeth Gilbert in that book comes up with 1 word to describe each of the countries she visits. So eat for Italy, pray for India, and then love for Indonesia. And that's where those words come from. And someone asked her during the book, someone asked her during the story, Elizabeth, what is your word? What is your 1 word? And she's like, oh, I don't have 1 word. That's way too difficult. And I think it is too difficult, but I think we can all come up with 5 words. And the key in the 5 words is to have some balance of what I'm going to call hard skills and soft skills. So the 5 words branding exercise. So think either hard and soft skills or think like right brain, left brain. And I'll give you some examples. So I wouldn't want you to put I am, you know, analytical and a problem solver, and I'm organized. Trying to think of some other very left brain ones. Detail oriented. Those are all very left brain. Right brain might be I'm empathetic, I'm enthusiastic, I'm friendly, personable, etc. So you want to have some balance. I'm trying to remember my words. I think my words are something like warm, friendly, intelligent, productive, and sassy. And yes, those make up my personality. And you'll see that there's a balance there. Like warm and friendly and sassy are very sort of right brain focused, and then productive and intelligent are very left brain focused. So one thing that's kind of neat is come up with your own version of your 5 words. If you're really struggling, ask others, but make sure you only ask people that you trust and that know you well. You don't want to ask someone, you know, can you give me 5 words to describe me? And they come up with something negative. So don't ever ask anyone that you don't get along with or that pushes your buttons, or, you know, or as we say in New York, I'll give you 5 words. You know, you don't want to ask someone like that. You want to ask someone that like believes in you and would give you a good version of your 5 words. Another really powerful exercise is give someone else their 5 words. So give your spouse, your children, some of your coworkers, your best friends, be like, you know what, I thought of 5 words that describe you. It's actually kind of neat. And others, you know, will look at you, especially if the words are pretty awesome, and they say to you like, wow, you see me like that? And you can actually boost someone up that way. So does anyone have an idea? You don't have to have all 5 words. I'm putting you on the spot. Does anyone have at least 1 or 2 words, and would they feel comfortable saying them to share? Passionate, that's a good one. Did you say compassionate or passionate? Passionate, thank you. Anyone on the chat have some examples of 5 words for themselves? Go ahead. Good, those are great. Dedication shows so much when you think about it. It shows stick-to-itness, it shows accountability, it shows staying the course, it shows loyalty, so that's actually a really good one. And by the way, if you kind of have an idea of what you want your words to be, but you're not really sure, email me. I'm really good at coming up with words. If people are like, well, I'm kind of this, but I'm kind of that, but I can't really put it in a word, you know. My husband recently, I was preparing to do this type of talk for a group of teens at a teen leadership conference. And what a great exercise to do with a group of teens who might have a lot of insecurities. And there was one kid that, you know, throughout the talk just seemed really shy and really uncomfortable to be there. And they said, does anyone want to come up to the front of the room and give their 5 words? And he raised his hand, stood up in front of the room, like put his chest out and said, hi, you know, my name is Brian and these are my 5 words. And then said these 5 words that were so amazing. Like, I'm loyal and, you know, dedicated and this and that. And I was like, oh, wow. You know, and everyone else in the room was like, oh, wow. So, you know, never judge a book by their cover. Yeah. Did you have another? Good. Okay. I like, I'm going to add the other one, dedicated. Enthusiastic we have. Funny was a new one. Detail-oriented, good. That's an interesting one. So where would we put collaborative? Is that a soft skill or a hard skill? I'd say it's kind of both, which is interesting. By the way, funny. My husband is really funny, and I don't even think he realizes how funny he is. Kind of has a dry sense of humor, and he only pulls out his funny for people that he really likes and knows well. And so I feel like it's kind of a real gift if he gives you his funny, if that makes sense. And so when he, when I asked him, do you want me to give you your 5 words? He said, yeah. And I said to him, you're funny and smart and generous and extremely compassionate. I mean, he's a veterinarian, works with animals all the time, and then loyal. And those were his 5 words. And so I think it's an interesting thing about, like, would you ever want to tell someone who you're networking with or you're thinking of working with that you're funny? Yes, I want to work with funny people. I wouldn't mind laughing during the day, So sometimes you're worried, like someone said to me, you feel comfortable saying sassy? I'm like, yes, my clients hire me because they know I have the smarts and they know I'm going to give them good content, but they also know they're going to have fun. So I don't see anything wrong with sassing up some of your words as long as it's appropriate. Obviously, you want to stay away from inappropriate words. Were there any others? Ooh, that's a good one. Bold. And that's another, there are some words, I'll be honest, that you have to be careful and maybe put them in context, because someone might be like, bold in what way? A risk taker, a good decision maker, or bold as in inappropriate. So you have to think about that. There was another one that you said that I really liked. Curious. That's a great one. I always like to say I'm a lifelong learner, and that could help you a lot on an interview if you don't have all the skills to be able to say, I am extremely intellectually curious, and I would love nothing more than to be challenged more in my job and to have to actually learn things as opposed to being bored in the job I'm already in. You might not feel comfortable doing this, but how many of you are getting a little bored in your job, right? So if you are, being intellectually curious can be a wonderful thing. And then that might have been it. Good, awesome words. If you can do for homework, I'd like you to do as your homework to come up with your 5 words and then think about, are you highlighting those words? If you describe yourself on social media, if you describe yourself in an objective or a summary statement, do those words show up? If you're talking to someone at an event for one of these professional associations, would they know this about you? If you've got these 5 words, but no one knows them, then come out of hiding and start to highlight them a little more. Another piece of homework would be to go through the skills list, the transferable skills list, and highlight the ones that you have and then the ones that you need, and then come up with your game plan. How are you going to get the ones you need? And whether that is at work, again, can you do that in your current position? Maybe you ask for a project that you've never done before at work. Hey, you say to your boss the next staff meeting, I actually would like to run that project or be on that project. They don't have to know that you're doing it to develop skills because you're still helping them. Or do you go outside of work to get these skills? So that would also be part of your takeaways of what I'd love for you to work on. And then the more you can feature these transferable skills, these 5 words, and everything that also shows up in your UBP, the more you can feature those in your networking, your social media profiles, your daily job. By the way, if you want to stay in your current division, for example, like you don't really want to leave your department, you love your supervisor, for example, but you want him or her to start looking at you having these transferable skills, then it's your job to start highlighting them. Start saying, like, if you want to be perceived as collaborative, start collaborating. If you want to be perceived as someone that is curious, start being more curious. Start speaking up more at meetings and asking for more assignments and things like that. So match your transferable skills. Don't just say you have them, but show them, demonstrate them. Yeah. Does anyone have any last minute questions before we part and send you on your way? Anyone have any questions on the chat, comments? Okay, unique brilliance proposition. So I'll tell you where that comes from. In sales, they have something called unique selling proposition, USP. And that doesn't really translate outside of the sales community. So, if you look at like Coldwell Banker, which I know a lot of people know is a real estate company. Well, what's their unique sales proposition? So let's say their unique sales proposition is friendly service, or maybe national brand or something like that. Well, you don't really have a USP as a person. Like, it's kind of awkward, like my unique selling proposition. You're not really selling. So we've changed it in life coaching, executive coaching, and career coaching to the UBP, which is what makes you uniquely brilliant. So think of it as a way to describe your unique thumbprint. Good question. Any other questions? That's a good question. So she said, when we were talking about archetypes, is there a test? There are some books to figure out what your archetype is. But I haven't ever seen like just an online test. You could take an online test for many of these. Well, some of these are paid. You have to pay. Some of these are not. Like Gallup Strength Finders has a great book. Enneagram you could take online. Fascination Advantage is a book. But I've never seen a test online for an archetype. I have seen a test online for brain types, which is different. And that's just going to tell you, like, do you tend to, we all obviously have two hemispheres of our brain and we use both of them, but do you tend to be more of a right brain thinker or left brain thinker? That's actually not terribly useful in jobs. I mean, it can be, but I actually think I worry sometimes that people will hear, like they'll take a test and find out they're right brain focused, and then they'll start to think of themselves as disorganized and not analytical, and that's not necessarily true. Just like the opposite way, if someone takes the test and they find out that they're really left brain strong, very linear, analytical, they might be like, oh God, I'm not very creative. And again, that might not be true. So I think that that test is probably less useful. But there are some great books on archetype, and it takes longer to read a book, I understand that, but you know, they could be really, really useful in terms of understanding what your through line is. I would start with the Julia Cameron book because it's easy, it flows. There's a great book on archetypes, and I apologize that I can't remember the name. If I think of the name, I'll send it to Carmen and she can post it. Oh, good, perfect. So Sally has an online test now, good. Is it for fee? I think it's a small fee, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's cost prohibitive. If I remember, it was like, you know, under $100 or something, but hers is kind of neat because what she does is she gives you these two different archetypes in the Fascination Advantage. Like there's like Mystique, and I can't remember the names of them all. And then under each archetype, like you get two of them, and then you go on this grid and you show where the two of them meet, and then where they meet, it has 6 words, 3 for each archetype. So it's kind of a neat combination because it gives you your type, and then it gives you your words that go with that type. If you are interested in one that shows you, so Enneagram, I happen to like the best, even though it's the least known. And the reason is, Enneagram, in my opinion, is sort of a combination of the Gallup Strength Finders, the Myers-Briggs, and the Fascination Advantage. And the reason is, if you do the Enneagram long test, which I admit is long, it's like 85 questions, but it's way more accurate than the short test. The Enneagram not only shows you what you are, like you're a number 1 or a number 3, and then those have names, like the achiever, the the justice worker, the this, the that, you know, they always have these cool names. But it doesn't just show you what you are. It shows you the healthy ways that manifests in your life and work, and the unhealthy ways that it manifests. So that is really invaluable because I think mine is the achiever. Oh, and it does something else cool. It tells you famous people that fall under that category. So I was in very good company with like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and like Thurgood Marshall, and I wasn't surprised. I'm an attorney. I don't practice law anymore, but after 9.5 years, I left and started this business. But obviously, I was not surprised to see that I'm in with a bunch of other lawyers and judges, you know. But it'll say that, you know, you're a natural born leader, and you know, you have great analytical skills and problem solving skills, and you're very goal oriented, which is why you're called the achiever. Bad ways this could show up: as a kid, you could be a bossy little brat. So you know, there were some interesting things in there. You could be a control freak, and I'm thinking, yeah, that would be me, right? So it's interesting, Enneagram, because it's the only one that doesn't just show you your strengths under that category, it also shows you your weaknesses, which is actually helpful to be able to go, okay, this is something I have to work on and overcome. Yeah. So probably way more than you need, but this was going to be a crash course in transferable skills, so why not? Any other questions on the chat? Feel free to email me. You have the handout, you have my contact info if you have any further questions, and let me know how you do. If you want to send me your 5 words, if you want to send me your UBP, if you want to tell me a year from now that you applied for a great new job and got it using your transferable skills, I'll be very happy to cheer you on and to cross my fingers for you and anything else that needs to be done. So thank you for attending, whether you were here live or whether you're on the chat. We appreciate it, and go do your homework. Thanks. You're welcome. You're welcome.